Hello and welcome. We're really excited to have everyone here today for our weekly OCI deep dive. And of course, we invite you to create a free account, join in discussions, and look for upcoming events on all kinds of topics. I'm Zaid, Product Marketing Manager with OCI Go-to-Market Strategy Team. And today, we're joined by my colleague, our presenter, Michael Fischer. Michael is a Cloud Master Principal Security Domain Specialist, part of the Oracle EMEA Technology Engineering team. We also have Olaf. Olaf is our EMEA Field CISO Specialist. Olaf will be helping us with the Q&A. Together, they'll walk us through a very interesting security topic on how to elevate OCI security posture with multi-factor authentication, or MFA. One of the most effective and proven approaches for strong authentication is multi-factor authentication, a key capability with OCI identity and access management. And as always, our quick housekeeping reminders. We encourage you to use the Q&A window at the bottom of your screen for any questions during the presentation. Our presenters will be looking to that Q&A box and not the chat. So make sure to ask your questions in the Q&A box so they don't get missed. And of course, we're recording today's presentation, so if your colleagues were unable to make it or you'd like to return to this content, we'll share the link to the replay later on as well. Okay, that's enough for me now. Please go ahead and take it away, Michael.
Thank you, Zaid, and hello from my side altogether. So I will now go through a short presentation about the multi-factor authentication within OCI and a short demo on the console to show how this is configured and can be used. So from both perspectives, from the admin and from the user endpoint. So this I've divided it up into the general explanation how this MFA is built in to OCI and how it can then be configured. So as you know, OCI or Oracle has a broad platform from identity management components, so on-premise license-based components, as well as cloud-based services. So the services are in the upper bar here. And today I will focus only on one component. So this is the identity and access management within OCI. So as you know, if you start with OCI, you get as first, as the one who has bought the tenant or spin up the tenant, an administrator user, which is a member of the administrators group, which is entitled as root user. So this root user can do all in the tenant. And there are no further users created, no further groups are present. And so it starts all with a zero trust model. So no one else is allowed to do anything within this tenant. So to get a somehow structured tenant for later usage, it's first required to think about the security model. So this means here, this one is building up the structure of the tenant. So for example, when you have a test department, which then gets a compartment. So a compartment is a logical container within the cloud where you are bound. So you cannot break out of your compartment and go into other areas of the OCI tenant. So you can separate, for example, different user groups or different projects or different entities. So just as you like. And after the model, then you can begin adding further users because typically you have to assign a user the area in the tenant where the user can work and which resources he can access. And then you spin up the resources in the corresponding compartments. So there is the principle of the least privilege, which we try to enable you to use. So this means every new user starts with a zero trust, he can do nothing, and you have to grant him explicit. And most of the enterprises already have an IAM system, and it's recommended practice that if you have already an enterprise identity access management, so this is where the users are born, for example, driven through an HR system or any other system, and then authorized through a provisioning solution or a help desk or whatever, then this would be the source of trust for users in OCI. So otherwise you have to drive OCI as a satellite system which is not connected to the IAM. And for this, you have to set up the provisioning or for the users to be able to report this during compliance and audit phases in your enterprise. So this means you connect it for SSO and provisioning. Typically, this is Azure for most of the customers because they get Azure by accident from Microsoft and typically stay at this for user management for the other clouds. So this is more or less the hub for the identities. Then the next step would be to enforce the multi-factor. We'll come later on how this can be analyzed somehow. And leverage adaptive security. So this means adaptive security relies on a risk score at the user or on the environment, and then makes decision which authentication method should be used, for example, or if the user cannot authenticate at all. And lastly, there is a mechanism for the IAM to have several of them within one tenant. And so it's easy, for example, to physically separate your test users from your enterprise users or your customers from your users. So these and far more of the best practices are listed out in this white paper. So just to have a quick look at it. So this is a white paper, you see 21 pages, and it goes step by step through the different aspects of configuring and using identity management within an OCI tenant. So here now I shall recap how does authorization within a tenant work. So first you have the users. You see the users are always bound to a group, so you cannot directly entitle a user for permission. So you will entitle a group with so-called policies. And you also can entitle instances or services with policies to access some of the resources. So here, for example, block storage or network within a compartment or the whole tenant. So this means instances are bound, in our case, to a PKI. So it is identifiable by a certificate. And so it can be referred in the policy with the OSIT. So this is the identifier or the environment where the instance is living. And so it can be a fine-grained access. So then you can, for example, allow an instance to use the object storage to store data. And if you have not this instance in a policy, then it cannot store data. So it will get an error if it tries to. So not authorized error. Same, of course, for all of the users. Here's a picture which shows on the left side a sample on how a tenant can be structured. So you start with a root compartment. So this means the root is the tenant itself. And in the tenant, you can define different compartments. And you see here the red boxes are the compartment structure. You see this is like a tree. And here it's a structure based on the environment. So this means a production environment is the first compartment. And the child compartment of this is sales, because here they went for the different business entities, and in sales, the next child compartment is the project or the application base. So here, for example, the retail, and then retail is again divided up in different compartments. Making such a split with compartment makes it easier to entitle the different people. For example, if you want to separate the database admins for the for any applications within the sales compartment, or let's take a more sensitive one, the HR compartment, then you can easily define this on a compartment level. So you don't have to think about where is the database, is this perhaps within a database department, and so on. So this is the structure based on the hierarchy. And if this is not sufficient, we have a separate, an additional mechanism, which is called tags. So this means you can put a tag on every resource and decide within a policy which of the resources can be accessed by the group. So this is the second dimension. And then you would easily spin up a more complex structure. So this is both is used by customers in parallel. So this is now a decision upfront, make it compartment or tags. Most of the customers use both. And the image on the right shows within a tenant where you have two identity domains. So when you get started, you have one domain. So this is the default domain. So the default domain is intended to manage the whole tenant. So therefore, I have here the manage as intention of this usage. And so this means they spin up resources, they make the structure, they entitle users. And then here I've built up a second identity domain for test purposes. Then if you have here users which are within this IAM domain and can only use or manage applications in the test environment. So the test environment can itself be a compartment. So let's assume I have here a test compartment. Then this would entitle them to use the resources in the compartment. But you don't have to entitle users in an identity domain for resources. You also can go and use these users for, I will derive here an application which is outside the tenant. And you can even use the users for this one. So for example, for single sign-on or for any other test purposes. So it's not limited to the tenant if you work with a different identity domain. Now I switch to the multi-factor topic of this presentation. You know, multi-factor requires two or more distinct authentication factors. It's obvious because it's multi-factor. So typically the first one is password or PIN. And then you go for a second factor, for example, for a factor you have, like a time-based one-time token generator on your mobile phone or anywhere else. Or you go for an additional factor like your fingerprint. If you take this for authentication, or if you take this to enable the time-based one-time token generator to pop up. So if you lock it down with your fingerprint, then this is also an additional factor. So this is quite near from the definition to strong authentication, because time-based one-time connectors and so on are also recognized as strong authentication factors. But the multi-factor means you have at least two distinguished ones. And why using my MFA is clear. So first, from a risk perspective, if you see this one, most of the breaches are based on guessed, stolen, or phished passwords. And with MFA, you can detect them from these simple cases. And we have seen last week a presentation where 80% of any breaches are based on these ones. So you see, protecting this with multi-factor is an easy one. And beside the risk, there is also the topic of recommendations from the Center of Information Security, from the CIS. So in the foundation spec benchmark, it is listed as recommended mechanism. In this, it is listed as recommended. In the ITIL emergency change request, it is listed, of course, in the IAM best practices. And also it is required as state of the art from different regulations. So for example, if you look in the GDPR addendums, then you will find that you have to provide state of the art security. So, and there are samples like encryption listed, and you can be sure if you have a breach and your customer data have been accessed without appropriate protection like MFA, because personal data are covered by the GDPR, then you can be sure you get fined, and the fine will be the higher, the less your security has been. But of course, best practice is not only the MFA topic, but also to have strong passwords, then detective controls for logins with high privileges, or to detect suspicious logins, not sharing accounts, because then you have the problem with the audit that you never know who was the actor behind this activity. In a well-defined IAM process, which most of the customers have because of regulatory requirements. So recertification, for example, is the periodic attestation of the accounts and entitlement the user has. For example, finance has to do this every 3 months at least. And for other companies, it's only recommended. So MFA, you see here the full picture of the IAM domain functionality in OCI is only a small part. So here the red circle. So the IAM relies on a database where the users are stored, meaning without knowing the user, IAM cannot authenticate a user. This can be either on the fly, creating the user, or with well-defined the provisioning. So this is what I would go for. And you have several possibilities to do the login. Here, the screen is the native login, user password, and you can also go for example, social login. This means the OpenID providers like Facebook, Google, and Co. Or federated login. This is the SAML one. And then connect your providers. It can also be used to connect applications like the box I draw before. So any application can be connected, which is able to provide any of these standards like SAML, OAuth, or API calls. Multifactors which are provided or supported by OCI MFA are listed here in this list. So the most common one is the providing the SMS as an access code, so the number, or with an email, but both are not very secure because SMS and email are provided over clear text internet, so mostly not protected. Same security questions, perhaps you can guess some of them, depends on your config, and so the better ones are the ones you leave, like you have a mobile app passcode. So this is the image here on the right, which uses here a push. So this is the notification which is used, and the passcode would be the number which is created by the time-based one-time authenticator. So and a more stronger one might also be the FIDO2 authenticator. So OCI implements the mechanism, and you then can enroll your FIDO2 authenticator for the login here. All of them are configured by the admin from an IAM domain to make them available for further usage, and you can enable them more or less all, and only allow for certain also like calling an HCM application, only for example FIDO and the authenticator. So you can lock them down to the appropriate one for the application. So MFA is in OCI at different services. So this means we have here the separation in old tenants. So all tenants are tenants which have an IDCS within the tenant, and new tenants rely on the IAM domain. You see it already at the login screen, which of them you have. But as not all tenants have been converted to IAM domain tenants, I have listed it here. So, for example, most of the Frankfurt-based tenants are not already migrated to the IAM domains. Therefore, you will have these two. And in the old tenants on OCI you can decide if you log on with OCI legacy native, I name it. So this means the local user in OCI. There you can define that MFA can be enforced through a user, so you make it available. And you can put an MFA assurance in the policy to ensure that only an MFA authenticated user gets the entitlement granted. So this means he can only spin up, for example, databases if MFA login was used. And you can do it for an overall authentication setting here. So with these all tenants, you can also use IDCS for the login in OCI. So this is the standard configuration. And there you define MFA with so-called sign-on policies in the configuration. And there you define if this is all logins or only some or dedicated application, for example, HCM. And you can select different MFA methods for usage. So this was the list I have shown in the slide before. And you can even go with the so-called passwordless login with some strong authentication like FIDO. So this is the configuration where we later look at. So just which of these MFA methods are allowed by you as admin. And you see I've left out the security questions, for example, and the SMS topics. And then you will entitle them in these policies for usage. And OCIM domains have best of both worlds. So this is somehow the union without an overlapping to make it easier for the use. I will then use as demo already the IAM domains because these are the most used ones in the tenants. So what has been updated in every tenant was Oracle enforced a sign-on policy for the OCI console. So OCI console is the browser-based user interface for managing the tenant and the resources. And there was a one sign-on policy defined only for the console login. So this means it does not affect your other services. And there have been two rules. So a policy is built up with rules. So this is how the policy is named if you log on your tenant. There's one for admin and one for other users. So these are these two rules, MFA, admin, all other users. And depending on your environment, because this was done on existing tenants, it was a different enforcement within these rules. So what happened when description can be found in this link. So one remark, the MFA of an IDP is not recognized. So if you have, for example, Azure and have your MFA on Azure, then this rule would even trigger. So you will go here and make some customizations, for example, to accept other login mechanisms where MFA has already been enforced. So I will show how this can be added as an exception. And so now it comes to your tenant and to the other cases where MFA might be a useful step in the authentication. So I have preconditions. So this is, you have already implemented a process for the administrators group. You remember administrators is somehow the root user or the root user group in the tenant. So typical solutions for these they are only allowed as breaking glass users or emergency access. So I have here the reference to a second paper here, or where you can have a look at how this can be achieved. And I assume you have a process for the credentials. So this means these credentials, the other credentials a user can have, and for the API keys. So API keys is the API access page based on signing request. So most have put them in a privileged access management system, or even they do not allow the users to use this. So this is a capability of a user. And so you stay up or you rest up with only some technical users which require this. For example, the pump system to enable users within the breaking glass process. And then you, I assume you have a monitoring for privileged access. So any user who is using an administrator's group. So even if the break glass process was granted, then you will monitor what the user is doing, and when this access no longer or is ended. So to get to the scope of what should be protected by MFA, so I would suggest as first step, define your critical access. So this means what can be critical is spinning up resources. So this means if you think about your tenant, and depending on your billing model, someone can spin up resources until your quota is reached. And so you would have to spend much money on things which others misuse. And if someone gets access with, for example, guest passwords, this is a problem of your account, of your tenancy. So you are responsible for this. So you have to protect yourself. What will happen if there is someone able to access my tenant by, for example, phishing? The next thing to consider is, where do I have sensitive context like personal data? Because as you know, this has to be protected from, for example, the GDPR perspective, but also these are your crown jewels where you have, or perhaps patents and other things. So this typically requires an extra protection. And then you have these implicit things. So perhaps you have services which might initiate changes under the hood. So if you have, for example, connected a help desk system, then the help desk system can spin up resources. Or if you have a DevOps process, then you might also be able to extend the environment, which then is not intended. So for step 2, I assume these considerations have all been done. Then you can go and check which authentication SSO do I allow at all. So if you go for example for SSO, so if you say SSO is the only accepted login method within my OCI tenant and the SSO is already enforcing MFA, I do not need to switch on the OCI MFA for these cases. If my SSO has no MFA, then I would recommend to make this one, for example, for at least the administrators groups and these things. So if you allow local login, so this means native login, like here mentioned, then the question is this a break glass user which is already managed through an external system, so the privileged access management system? So then it's also good. So these are the OKs, if you will. And for all other cases, because we are in this group, enforce MFA. So this is how the use cases can be found. To do the enforcement, I will show the config then. You first have to enable MFA at all. So this means you decide which technologies can be used, like the authenticator, and then you can configure each of the MFA methods more specific. So this is the step you do once. You can change it later on if you decide on putting methods within this group or change the settings. And then you go for the configuration parts. This means you define the sign-on policies with the rules. So rules are part of the sign-on policy, which then enforce the MFA. Such a policy is either generic, so this means for every login, or it can be overwritten if you decide a policy for a special app. So this is the example already with the OCI console, or you can use this also for any custom app. The exception is you can only have a policy. So the policies have to be unique from the scope. So you can have only one default policy and only one policy per app. So if you try to do this, then and you succeed, then you get suspicious behavior which is not very clear. So this might be then a problem because you have created two policies with the same same scope. So like building a default policy, copying it and disable the original one brings side effects. So therefore try create only one for every scope, and then it is working fine. So the policies contain rules. You will see it later. The rules are processed in their order. So this is like a firewall rule if the first rule is hidden, which doesn't allow, then the access gets granted. A best practice during the configuration phase is having a backdoor, because you can lock you out of the tenant. So of course, support can revoke this configuration again later on, but this takes some time. So here is the question: if you have an API client where you can remove again this wrong written policy or deactivate the ones, and last step is you have to activate the one and of course to verify. So from an end user perspective, so this was the admin side in the slide before, it will depend on how the MFA enrollment is configured. So typically it will be enforced during login. So the user is doing a user password login, then it is detected the user has not been enrolled for MFA. Then he is requested to do this. Otherwise, he cannot log in. So this is the typical configuration. Other ones are possible. And once the user is enrolled, he can add further enrollments. So this means if you go for the one-time token and you have 2 mobile phones, then you can add within your self-service an additional device, for example. And the login dialog provides you a selection only the devices you have enrolled and the methods the administrator has allowed in the sign-on rules. So this means this man might change. And here also a side effect. So the same mechanism is valid for recovery of accounts. So if you do not have configured a recovery email, then you cannot recover your account with email. So because then it does not allow you to send yourself an email without a verified mail. And of course, if all breaks, the admin can reset the factors. So there's some functionality at the users where all these factors are removed, and then you can enroll again. So this is it's a typical accident case when you lost your mobile phone with the authenticator and cannot log in any longer because you have not configured a second one. Then this is the way for the admin to solve this problem. The MFA is enforced within the sign-on policies, as I have just explained. So within these sign-on policies. And you see, this is only a part of a bigger engine. So the policy can take into considerations, for example, in which groups the user is, the admin group. This is an easier one. Or from where does the user come? So this means if you come from inside your network or your country or whatever, then it's an easy login. And if you come from outside, then you enforce stronger MFA. And so there are many other factors like risk factors of the users where you can take this into the engine for which action is triggered. So do I allow access with MFA, and then which of the ones is required, or will I just deny the access, and so on. This is the engine, and this part is adaptive security called, and here of course the MFA part. OCI has a PAM module for Linux, a pluggable authentication module, which can be used for the Linux logon, and then the Linux can use the IAM domain, or here it's called Identity Cloud Service, which is the same. So this means, first of all, you can centralize all users from the Unix environments into the OCI IAM. And second, you can use the mobile authenticator as a strong authentication within the login. So this is how you can extend this one. So this means when you connect the Linux to the IDCS, the user logs on with user password and then gets prompted for the one-time token from the authenticator. So this is the case for the password login, just to show how this would look like, because I will not show this in live. So this means as a user, you get prompted for the name, and you see there's no password field, no strong authentication button. And after this, it will be decided which authentication method will be used. So to enable this behavior, you first switch as admin this setting. So this means enable user first, so that OCI knows who's the user who wants to log on. And then you have in the IDP policy, so this is not the sign-on policy, a condition. So for example, if you say, if the user comes from google.com, then you do another authentication. Or here I've taken a group example. If I'm in the users group, then I get prompted for the FIDO authentication. So just how this could work. For my demo setup, I have built up this environment. I have a tenant, which is a free tier, so everyone can test it on their own if they like to get experience with this configuration. I have out of box the default domain. So this comes with every tenant and with built-in groups like the administrators. So the asterisk means created by default through OCI. Then I've created a test compartment. So the yellow boxes are compartments here with identity domain which is called a micros demo domain 1 for testing, which also has an administrators group to manage the accounts here in the domain. And I created two groups, a users group and an admin group. And I created also an Apex application to show how this will work with a sample application. So I will first show the general config of this tenant with the policies and domains and the structure and the MFA. And then I will take a demo user. So I will take always the same user and put it in a different group to show the different behavior. So how MFA is enforced, how MFA is not enforced, depending on the group membership, how the Apex is enforcing MFA, even if the users is only in the users group and not in the admin group. So independent of any group membership. And then I will show how the IDP configuration will be able to skip the MFA for the console. But again, here, Apex will override this and enforce MFA in any case. And then from the end user perspective, where these configurations of MFA can be managed. And so there are two places, therefore I have here 2 points on this. So now I go to the tenant where the configuration is in. So I went for the identity section because here are the IAM and the policies. You see here I'm in the root compartment. If I open this box, then you see I have here a structure with only 3 compartments. So you remember the image before, I will go for the test compartment. The managed compartment is auto-created by OCI. In the demo compartment I have for other usage. So, and I will, you see here, I have this demo domain, which is bound to the test compartment. See, if I go to the root compartment, I only have the default one, which is out of the box provided. So I will do the rest of the configuration here. So for the demo domain, which I've created, you see there is an show on login. So this means this is available as a login domain. So if you turn this off, so this is with edit domain, then it will be not seen as a login option for the login. So as groups, I have used these groups, the admin group and the users group. So admin to enforce MFA, users group for standard users. As you have seen, I've also approved for MFA and policy for testing purposes. And for the users, I will go for the test user. And you see the test user is only in the users group for starting. So this means no MFA enforced, just to see how this works. So to entitle the user to do anything, the groups have to be referenced in policies. So I have these users group policies. So you see here now policy statement where the policy refers to the domain where the group is located. So users group is in my demo domain 1, therefore it's specified as this one. And here I only have inspect, so this means read of the resources, and also scoped with test compartments. So I cannot check if there are, for example, any compute instances in root. The admin policy is so far more stronger, so this allows here manage all resources. So this is the easier case if you want to create for a developer a compartment or a structured compartment where he can do anything. Of course, you will provide him some quotas so that he can, for example, not use more than 3 CPUs or 1 database. So these are covered by quotas, these restrictions. And here I have as example, which I do not use, how this multi-factor can be referred to in a work clause in the policy. So this statement means where MFA time-based runtime token has been verified true. So this means the logged in user has enrolled a device and has logged on with using this device. So just to show how this will work. So this will be not relevant for my test case. So then I go now in the MFA configuration. You see here, remember perhaps this is the screen you have seen before. So I've selected the MFAs which are available in my tenant. So you see security questions, email, I do not allow bypass code, also not. So it's mostly based on the passcode. So this mobile authenticator I will use for later. And then you can see for each of these MFA, you can configure the behavior. So this means, for example, for a mobile authenticator, you can specify that it has to be opened by fingerprint. Otherwise, you will not accept this one. And same for others, for example, if you need the FIDO rollout. So after this is configured at all, you have to reference this by the sign-on policies. So I go first for the last one. You see I have deactivated this one for the console. So this is the one provisioned by Oracle. And here I have these, what I listed with the MFA administrators and so on. And you see the rule would go for if I'm domain administrator and administrators group, then I will be prompted for an additional factor. And here I selected the configured MFA topics, and same is for users. So these are the default rules. I have disabled them because I have used the default policy and put therein the logic I required. So this means first, I assume here, if I come from Azure, I do not have to be enforced with MFA, even if I'm admin member. So this grants me access. And if I come not from Azure, then the next rule is triggered. So this means here in the case, if I have any other authentication and I'm a member of the admin group, then I get prompted for MFA. And then I have the last rule, which means I'm not in the administrators group, so I allow access without MFA. So this is how the rule or the default policy is. And here I have the Apex one, which overrides the default one, because here you see in the Apex, in the app section, it's for my application, which is called Apex. And this one enforces MFA in any case. So it does not care about the login. It says, in any case, it will be prompted for MFA. So I'll now go for the login. So you see here my domains, I can choose between them. I have everything in the default domain. Then you see if I've configured in the IDP rule that I can log on with IDP, but first I go for the direct login. So now I'm logged in. You see here in the above, I'm the test user 1. And if I try to list the instances, just to show how the policies work, you see in the root compartment, I don't have permissions. And if I go for the test compartment, I would be able to list them all. So now I log out again. And just wait for the screen. And I go for the user and put him in the admin group. So this would now trigger the MFA. So when you see I'm prompted for the passcode, I have enrolled it before. So I have to provide the one-time token, which is time-based, so only valid for 60 seconds. So it's bound to an account. So I have in my authenticator about 20 accounts. You see I'm the same user. And now I go for my profile to see the enrollments. So here you see recovery mail not configured, but I have here rolled out my mobile app on the iPhone, which is my default one. So because in the screen you may be able to select a further one with further options, and then you can go for the other two-step verifications which you have configured. If you want to add a mobile phone, this is just an easy, it's like, for example, add mobile app for the time-based one-time authenticator. So you see, this is the Oracle one. And if you have another one, not an Oracle one, then you can go for manual enrollment. And if you don't have a screen relay, then you have to provide for initialization this one. And after that, you get this device enrolled. So you can have more than one. So now I will go for logout and for the Azure login, just to show that with Azure, I'm not enforced to do the MFA. So here the proof, you see I'm the test user 1, so I'm the same user. And I again go to my profile. And beside the security where the devices are listed, I have here the apps console. So these are personal assigned applications. As mentioned, I have here the Apex. And now Apex enforces me to do the MFA. So this means even if the login policy of the console has let me in without an additional factor, the Apex is configured as prompt for MFA in any case. So, and here I'm again in Apex. So that was the test cases I wanted to show from this perspective. So I was successful in all, and I have here now some resource links. So for example, the MFA with design on policies, how this works can be viewed in this YouTube video from Olaf, who is in the also here on the Zoom. Then you have a blog to see how this MFA setup can be done by default. It's done by default. And here you have a so-called quick tip from Paul to see how much users have enrolled MFA already. So this is CLI based, so you will get the result that you can proceed with them in Excel or in any other automation. Here again, the link of the best practices, and MFA is free in most of the domain types. Most means SMS, of course, cannot be free because this provides costs in any cases. So therefore, but precisely described in the link. So now we can take one or two of the best questions. Olaf?
Actually, there was no question.
So great.
That is a good sign because you kind of covered every possible question.
Great. So this would be the natural end of my presentation. May I hand over to Zed?
So there is a thank you for the quick overview on MFA, and the links for that. The links will be shared on the Cloud Customer Connect with the presentation.
Thank you so much. I just shared the replay link. That was a fantastic presentation and demo, Michael. We greatly appreciate your time. A special thank you to Michael and Olaf for this presentation. So thank you so much, and hope to see you next time.